omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. Don't get caught in it. Just notice it, nod to it, and go on. Don't get stuck in it. But it was too tasty for us to let it go, and it continues to be quite tasty. It's very hard to understand that the spiritual freedom is very ordinary. It's nothing special, and that's what's so precious about it. And we keep trying to make it into something. With all these powers came a tremendous amount of energy, because if you meditate, you quiet your mind just a little bit, the amount of energy that is dissipated through your monkey mind of thinking, going from here to here, the minute you concentrate it even the tiniest bit through chanting or meditation or anything, you start to tune to other planes of reality where there is an incredible energy. It's like if you're a toaster sticking your plug into 220 instead of 110 and everything fries. And many, many people had these incredible, and continue to have, these incredible experiences of energy, or Shakti, or what's often called Kundalini, which is the energy rising up the spine. And I recall the first time it happened to me, I really thought I had damaged myself. I mean, it was so violent. As it started up my spine, it felt like just 1,000 snakes climbing my spine. And it got to my second chakra, and I remember I ejaculated automatically, and then it kept going up, and I was really frightened, extremely frightened, because I hadn't expected anything this horrendous. And I get calls all the time, as does, I'm sure, the Spiritual Emergence Network and Stan and Christina, who've done a wonderful job with that organization, by the way. I get calls often from people who are having Kundalini experiences, who says, I'm a therapist in Berkeley, and this thing's happened to me, and I ride my bicycle for 6 hours a day, and I don't get tired, and I can't sleep, and I cry at the strangest moments, and I think I'm going insane. And I said, well, let me read you a list of all the symptoms, which I have in a Xerox. And she said, I thought I was the only one having that. I said, no, it's Xerox. Swami Muktananda published it a long time ago. And it's just Mother Kundalini at work, and don't worry, it'll pass, and just breathe in and out of your heart, and keep it soft, and so on. But a lot of these phenomena started to happen to us, and they scared us, or they excited us, or they entrapped and enamored us, and we stopped to smell the pretty flowers. Many people, when they went into the plane where they experienced this power, brought their egos up with them and interpreted it as my power, and they went into a messianic journey where they tried to convince everybody that they were the one. And that was very painful for everybody, extremely painful. I remember a moment with my brother, who was in a mental hospital because he was Christ, and he was doing terrible things as Christ, it turned out. And there was a moment where the doctor and my brother and I met in this hospital ward together. And the doctor wouldn't let him see anybody without the doctor being present. And I came in a beard and a dress and beads. My brother was in a blue suit and a tie, see? And he was locked up and I was free, which the humor of which didn't escape any of the three of us, you know. And he said to me, we were talking about whether the psychiatrist would ever know he was God. The psychiatrist was writing on his clipboard, very uncomfortable, I mean, because my brother and I were really out there floating. And then my brother said, I don't understand, why am I in a hospital and you're free? You look like a nut. And I said, well, you think you're Christ? He said, yeah. I said, well, I'm Christ too. He says, no, you don't understand. I said, that's why they're locking you up. The minute you tell somebody they're not Christ, watch out. And so that was the messianic phenomena that happened along the way. Is this too heavy, or are you still with me? Okay. Because I'm trying to cover an awful lot of material a little fast, and I'm sorry about that. Now, in a lot of people, when the energy got so intense from their spiritual practices, they really lost their ground. They lost it on this plane. And that's what the Spiritual Emergence Network has done to help these people, because in India or other cultures, when that happens, those are called, like Meher Baba served those people, they were called masts or God intoxicants. And everybody knew if somebody flipped, like Anandamayi Ma, one of the greatest saints of all time. She was a Bengali woman, a very dignified woman, and she spent about 2 years doing cartwheels in her front yard and throwing off her sari and stuff. Now, in our culture, that is Bellevue material. And in that culture, it is, there's a god intoxicant. We must take care of them at a temple. So that there was a very, we have not had a support system for that kind of transformative loss of ground, which you need to go through at times. And you go through the ground and then you regain it. A lot of people just went out. You know, I remember in the early days, the whole game was to get everybody out, to get them to let go of their minds and the heaviness. Then you looked out and everybody was floating. And I look at half the audience now, I want to say, hey, come on up for air. It's okay. It's not so heavy in life. The other half, I want to say, come on, get your act together. Learn your zip code. Get a job, for Christ's sake. You know, it's when spiritual practices work a little bit, but you're not stable in your transformative experience, your faith is flickery, and that is when fanaticism breeds strongly. The mosquitoes of fanaticism breed in flickery faith environments. And that is really what happens to most disciples in spiritual scenes. They become much worse. When you meet a spiritual master in any tradition, you meet a Zen master or a Hindu, a Buddhist, Sufi, American Indian, whatever time you meet a master, you know, you meet and you recognize a mensch, you know? And like, we're really here. And they don't sit around saying, well, you're not following my way, so you're lesser. But all of the disciples right under them usually do. Deep enough in their faith yet to where they haven't come out the other end. Because you see, the thing about a method is that for a method to work, it has to trap you. If you try to dilettante your way through, it doesn't work. You've got to become a meditator. But if you end up a meditator, you lost. You want to end up free, not a meditator. There are a lot of people who just end up meditators. I've meditated for 42 years, and and they look at you with intense, with earnestness, It's the golden chain of righteousness that caught them again. But a method must trap you. And then finally, if it works, it self-destructs. And you come through the other end and you're free of method. That's the story, that's what Ramakrishna's Gospel of Ramakrishna is so wonderful about, because he just went through Kali worship and then came out and then started to explore all the other methods. Because once you come through your method, all methods lead you to the same thing. People say, well, how do you do Buddhist meditation and you've got a Hindu guru and you're a Jew? I say, I don't have any problem. What's your problem? It seems fine for me. Shema Yisroel there's only one God, and the one has no name, so there's no form, so that's nirvana. I don't have any problem with that. What do you... The righteousness that we were... the way we were approaching the spiritual path had an element of righteousness in it. And teachers came along who really helped us a lot with it. The teacher that helped me most about my righteousness probably was Trungpa Rinpoche. And what you look for in a really good teacher is that quality of rascalness. Not scoundrelness, but rascalness. And I remember when I was teaching at Naropa the first summer that Naropa started, I was having a hard time with Trungpa Rinpoche. And one of the problems was that he had all of his students drunk most of the time. He had them busy gambling, heavy meat diets. And I thought, what kind of a spiritual teacher is this? All right, I mean, you can understand my dilemma. I came out of a Hindu renunciate path, Hindus are always afraid of falling over the edge, so the best thing is to just keep it all separate. But here he was, just taking them down the path to hell as far as I was concerned. And I was sitting judging. Oh, was I judging? Oh, was I, when I think back. When I looked at those same students a few years later, I saw students deep in the 100,000 prostrations, deep in the heaviest spiritual practices, because he had taken them through their obsessions and then on to deeper practices. He wasn't afraid to do that, while most of the other traditions were afraid to do that for fear everybody would get lost along the way. And that's what a tantric teacher is not afraid to do. And tantrics are very exciting and very scary. And you never know whether the tantric is just hung up her or himself, or whether they're an exquisite teacher. See, and there's no way you can know. Was Rajneesh's 92 Rolls Royces a ploy, or was it really a hung-up Indian? You know? I mean, you don't never know. All you know is that if you want to be free, you use them as hard as you can to be free, and their karmic problems are their karmic problems. See, and that's the secret you finally find out about teachers. So our period was a period of we were called the me generation, and that was because there was a narcissism, there was an inner work we had to do, and we still have to do it. An inner work that made us somewhat oblivious to our social roles in society. We were less interested in political things. And there was some metaphysical confusion around that, which is reflected in the difference, say, between Theravadan Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. Theravadan Buddhism, in the simplest, this is simplistic, and we all agree, and if Jack Kornfield's here, he knows I'm not speaking seriously, but the Theravadins, in effect, say, look, my job is for me to get enlightened. Then if I get enlightened, nothing exists anyway. That solves the problem. The Mahayana Buddhism say, nobody makes it till everybody makes it. So I might as well take the bodhisattva vow and hang back and help everybody, because I can't go anywhere till you get done too. You can see these are two, that's oversimplified, okay? But it did catch us a little bit, because many of us said, I've got to work on myself to become free. And others said, I've got to work with everybody else to help them become free. We've all got to become free together. And part of the anti-Vietnam action was part of the we've all got to work together, and the turning inward of many of us that just pulled back from political action was I've got to get free myself. Even though I could rationalize it and say I've got to get free so that when I do something for somebody else, I'm not creating suffering through the attachments of my own mind. A lot of people in the spiritual journey, once they realized that enlightenment wasn't going to happen the day after tomorrow, and once they started to get some powers because their mind got quiet. I mean, if you do TM 20 minutes a day, you will definitely get quiet and you will start to have powers. There's no doubt about it. Then the question is, what do you do? Those are called siddhis. And siddhis or powers are a terrible trap on the spiritual path. They are a real pitfall, because one is inclined to want to use them to do good. That's the one. And once you realize that, because the minute you see siddhis, you realize the game is not at all how you thought it was. Example, I was with, which story shall I tell? I was with Satya Sai Baba, the miracle man of southern India. Beautiful man. And he said, Ram Dass, let me give you something. And I said, no, Baba, I don't need anything. I have a guru. And he says, no, let me give you something. And he held out his hand, and I went up really close, and I knew what he does, see, so I wasn't going to blink, see, because I figured he might be a magician. I'm going to really watch. So I was about this far, and my eyes were fixed on his hand. And he went like this, and this bluish light appeared, and it turned into a medallion, which he then gave me. It was cold. It looked like it had been made in Tijuana. It was very badly made. It had a picture of him on a star on a circle. And I thought, my God, if he's going to bring something from somewhere else, the least he could do is bring me a you know, a crystal or something like that. So I said to one of the swamis there nearby, I said, well, that's wonderful. I said that he produces these. He said, oh, he doesn't produce them. I said, no? He says, no, he keeps them in a warehouse. He just moves them with his mind. I said, oh, well, if that's all he does, who the hell wants it, you know? I'll just give you one more, because they're hard to stop. I'm not going to tell you my guru miracle stories, because I wrote a book, Miracle of Love, and you can read them all to your heart's content. This one was with Swami Muktananda, who was a great guy, really. He was a real rascal. And he and I were traveling in southern India on a pilgrimage together. And one morning he got me up at 4 in the morning and he took me to a little temple and he sat me down and he whispered a mantra into my ear and then he started to do a puja and I passed out. I don't remember anything. About 5 hours later, somebody came and said, Baba wants you, and I had been, I don't know where I was, but I felt good. And I came back and the mantra was in my head. I said, what's that mantra? He says, that will give you vast wealth and vast power. Now, being a Jewish boy from Boston, that's what my father told me I wanted, you see. However, I'm now a righteous spiritual seeker, you see, so I said, I only want those if you give me an equal amount of compassion and love. And he says, just do the mantra. Well, I couldn't stop doing it. I mean, I was doing it day and night and waiting for the wealth and power. And I got back to his temple in Ganesh Puri. And he put me to meditate in the inner room of the meditation hall inside. And I went down there around 2 in the morning, and they unlock it with a big key, and it's hot. It was like 110 degrees. And I took off all my clothes, and I was lying there naked. And I started to do the mantra, and I was ripped out of my body. This is like 2 in the morning. And I come to another plane, and I'm at a doorway, and I look in, and there is Muktananda sitting on a table, a tucket. So I go in and I kneel down in front of him and I start to fly up over his head. Now this is all in the astral. And I think, wow, I'm flying. I always wanted to fly. And so then I was sort of flying and I started to tilt and I went to right myself and I was back in the meditation hall. This all took about 6 minutes. I was so manic from that experience. I mean, so high, that I put on all my clothes, rattled my gates, and they came with a key. And I opened the gate and walked outside into the dark night of the courtyard, and there was Muktananda with one of his disciples walking around in the middle of the night. And he walked over to me, and the man spoke English, and Muktananda said to me, how did you like flying? Okay? I mean, those are my direct experiences, so I have to live with that stuff. So the question is, when you get powers, like the power to just stay quiet enough to hear what's really going on in a situation, gets quiet so you're not reactive so much, but you're more responsive, there is a tendency to want to take your winnings and get on with it. I had a funny experience. I was in Oahu in Hawaii, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 years ago. And fellow said that I was with, Rick Bernstein, said, there's somebody that wants to see you in a shopping mall. I said, okay. So we went to this shopping mall after hours. It was closed, except there was a place in the shopping mall where there was a new Honda, where there was a competition to see who could keep their hand on the Honda the longest. And whoever did would win it. And there were 3 people left, and they had been there for something like 5 days. Okay? Day and night, they had their hand on the Honda. So I said to one of them, how do you do it? He said, I'm a Buddhist. Another one, I said, how do you do it? She says, I'm a Christian fundamentalist. Third one said, I'm your devotee, I'm a Hindu. And I realized that each of them was going to win the Honda through their spiritual powers, right? I'm not even going to tell you who won. But you take you take your gain and you put it to work. And it's an interesting question of whether I'm one of those people, because instead of my being in a monastery now getting on with that kind of inner work, I'm out here teaching. And is that a cop-out? Is that my dharma? I can say it, that it's my karma, my dharma, whatever, but I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know how we in the West are ready for the kinds of discipline that are necessary for the kinds of practices that we have been offered. I was in Burma 3 years ago meditating in a monastery for several months. Very, very severe meditation practice with Sayadaw U Pandita, who's my meditation master. And you got up at 3 in the morning, you meditated till 11 at night. In your cell, you did sitting and walking, that was all. You saw the teacher for 5 minutes a day, otherwise you were alone. You didn't read, you didn't write, you didn't do anything, you just did that. And it gets very subtle. I mean, after you finish with your 7-hour sexual fantasies and all that stuff, I mean, after you run through that, you run through in the first 3 days, and then that was 2 months of that. And so I got a telegram that my stepmother had cancer, was going to be operated on, and my father was very old, and they would probably need me. She didn't say that. She just said she was going to be operated on for cancer, which I didn't know she was ill. So I went to the teacher, Sayadaw, and I said, here, and I showed him the telegram. And he said, I don't think you should leave. I said, well, my stepmother, my father's old, they need me, it's a frightening time. He said, you're making such spiritual progress. Don't leave. He said, if you were a Burmese, I wouldn't let you leave. But I don't feel I have that power to do that because you're from another culture. And I looked and I saw that my karma, as a boy from Boston with a responsibility to my family, I wasn't a sadhu who had renunciated family. And I said to him, I've got to go. And we both saw the poignancy of the situation, if you can hear that. I mean, I had to go because it was my part as who I was to do it. At the same moment, he was saying, if you continue your path, you may relieve many people from suffering. As it is, you're going back, you'll relieve suffering of a couple of people. I said, I'm sorry, I got to do it. And it's like you get to the point where you see that you can only proceed on the spiritual path so fast because of your own karmic limitations, not because of what anybody's doing to you, but because of the stuff in you. And that you begin to recognize the timing of spiritual work, that you can't get ahead of yourself. You can't be phony holy because it comes back and hits you in the head. You can get so high, but you'll fall. And a lot of people fall off the path. They say they fell off the path. You see somebody who was busy in white dancing with big smiles on their faces, and you see them about a year later and they're in a bar having a scotch and soda, and well, I thought that was all bullshit, and then later they say, really, I fell off the path. And I say, no, you didn't fall off the path. The impurities with which you were doing it in the first place had their karmic effect. This is all the path. Once you have begun to awaken, you can't fall off the path. There's no way. Where are you going to fall to? You're going to make believe it never happened? You can forget for a moment, but it's in there. It's going to keep coming back and getting you and getting you. So don't get upset. It's okay. Go be worldly. And very often, I really push people into worldliness. Go out, have more sex, have more, really, more dope. Come on, make more money. Come on, do it. Do it until you're done with it. Don't get done too soon because you're going to be just, you're going to be greedy if you do. So a lot of our expectations were that the spiritual path, I'll just got a few more minutes. Can you handle just a few more? That the spiritual path would get us healthy psychologically. That was an expectation. I've said this in many lectures that some of you have heard, but it's interesting to me that I was trained as a psychologist. I was in analysis for many years. I taught Freudian theory. I was a therapist. I took drugs for 6 years intensively. I have a guru. I have meditated since 1970 regularly. I have taught yoga. I have studied Sufism and many kinds of Buddhism. In all that time, I have not gotten rid of one neurosis. Not one. The only thing that's changed is where previously they were these huge monsters of, no, don't take me over again, that kind of stuff, sitting in the bathtub, cowering. Now they're like these little schmoos, you know. Oh, sexual perversity, there you are, I haven't seen you in days, come on and have some tea, you know. And to me, that is the product of the spiritual path. That what's happened is I have now rested comfortably in another contextual framework which makes me much less identified with my own neuroses and with my own desires. If I don't get what I want, that's as interesting as if I get it, it turns out. Did you ever notice that? All this, I need you. Well, you're not getting me. Oh, you know, and then isn't that interesting? And then you grow from that. It's far out. When you begin to realize suffering is grace, you can't believe it. You think you're cheating. Yeah. Along the way on the spiritual path, you begin to get bored with the usual things of life. And Gurdjieff said, that's just the beginning. He said, our friends found us becoming dull, Ouspensky said. Gurdjieff said, that there is worse to come. Gurdjieff said, he's an interesting man who lies well. You have already begun to die. It's a long way yet to complete death, but still a certain amount of silliness is going out of you. You can no longer deceive yourself as sincerely as you did before. You have now gotten the taste for truth. And that happens, and you lose a lot of friends, and your friends change. And you don't grow at the same rate, and it's very painful, people you have loved, even in marriages, where other people aren't growing along with you, and that's a pitfall. It's very painful to go from until death do us part to we are together as long as the quality of loving growth is present in the relationship. And that's a complex topic that I really can't get into because it's very interesting. There's a lot of permutations of that one. But it's one that did catch many of us, about feeling guilty about letting go of friends and realizing you needed new kinds of relationships and new kinds of friendships. Along the way, when that gets deep enough, when the meaning, the stuff that you justified your existence in order to achieve starts to become meaningless, when even when you win, you didn't win anything, you start to experience the dark night of the soul, the despair that comes when the worldliness starts to fall away. Never are we nearest the light than when darkness is deepest, the dark night of the soul. And in a way, what's happening is the ego has been based on, the whole structure of it has been based on our separateness and our needs and desires to make us feel comfortable and happy and at home. And as Trungpa Rinpoche said in his rascally way, he said, enlightenment is the ego's ultimate disappointment. And that's the predicament. You see the fact that your spiritual journey is an entirely different ballgame than the one you thought you were on. It's a different path than you thought you were on. And it's very hard to make that transition, and a lot of people don't want to. They want to take the power from their spiritual work and make their life nice. That is wonderful, and I honor it, and it's great. And it's exactly your karmuppance. But that is not freedom, and that is not what the spiritual path offers as the potential. It offers freedom, but freedom demands complete surrender, meaning surrender of who you think you are and what you think you're doing into what is. And it's mind-boggling when you understand how powerful. It's the game of dying into yourself. But there is a death in it, and people grieve. There is a grief when you start, who you thought you were starts to disappear. Kalu Rinpoche says, he's a beautiful man, beautiful, beautiful man. He said, we live in illusion, the appearance of things. But there is a reality. We are that reality. When you understand this, you see that you are nothing. And being nothing, you are everything. That's all. Is that so far out? Can you hear that?